It's Monday morning and I'm here at the Whiteknights campus of the University of Reading. And this is what was referred to as Whiteknights House, is now referred to as Old Whiteknights House, and this was the first home to the MERL back in 1951. The university had just acquired the Whiteknights campus at that point, mid-20th century, and was keen to build academic departments. The founders of the museum, meanwhile, were keen to establish a folklife museum, an open-air site akin to those sites like Skansen in Scandinavia, in Sweden, that had inspired their project. Sadly for our purposes, the university won out and built academic departments, and we didn't end up with an open-air museum. What we did end up with was a thriving museum project that was very rapidly filled up. So by 1955 this site had opened as a public museum, and throughout the 1950s, as we've heard already in relation to that Shillingford visit in 1956 and other visits to royal shows, the museum had a peripatetic set of public displays. Larger objects like the wagons, of course, would never have fitted in this building, and so were stored outside under cover and in makeshift ways. And by the late 1960s, the museum had very much outgrown this site. And as a consequence, it had to move. So very early on in the museum's history, it moved from Whiteknights House here on the Whiteknights campus across to a series of temporary buildings over here. And we'll take a walk across there now. In 1954, the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, did a live TV broadcast from this site, with the founding father of a BBC radio serial called The Archers, Godfrey Baisley, presiding over a presentation with his friend and colleague John Higgs, one of the founders of the MERL. So up on this site were demonstrations of the museum's equipment, including, for those of you who made it to the Commons event yesterday, the threshing fan that Amanda Couch's work is displayed in front of in the museum, but also wagons. The portable steam engine was stoked and firing, and other objects and collections. The site we're coming across to now is currently another academic department, but this is a relatively recent building. And actually the museum stayed in a series of effectively temporary accommodation huts from the late 1960s through to 2004, when it moved down the road to the London Road campus, the current home of the museum, and where I've been broadcasting to you all during the Congress. And this temporary accommodation obviously proved out to be not quite as temporary as they'd imagined, but the temporary accommodation became known as the Rural History Centre, which housed within it the Museum of English Rural Life. So some of you may remember this building, or rather the buildings that used to sit here, as being the Rural History Centre. And what's nice about this for our purposes is that the Rural History Centre as was, and the Museum of English Rural Life temporary accommodation, was home to the International Association of Agricultural Museums Congress in 1976, so the 4th Congress of our organisation. And there's little here to remind us of that event and of the museum having been on this site, except for this cider mill. This cider mill was never accessioned into the museum's collections because it came from a local builder's yard and had little or no context. And it proved too difficult and heavy to move down to the current site back in 2004, and so it wasn't incorporated into the new public site that opened on that London Road campus in 2005. And it stands here as testament to the fact that the Museum of English Rural Life was once up here on the campus, the Whiteknights campus of the University of Reading.